I had settled into a comfortable life, having married into a wealthy family. As I relaxed in the hotel lobby, Mason's sharp voice disrupted my tranquility. His mocking tone cut through the calm as he bragged about his new wife, none other than the daughter of the president of Goldsmith Enterprises. His laughter was laced with pride, but it was the mention of Goldsmith Enterprises that caught my attention. I recognized the name but couldn't quite place it until it hit me. Mason continued to boast, oblivious to the irony I found in his self-congratulation. My name is Patricia, and I'm 37, content in my life with my husband Mason. I work in my family's real estate business, handling administrative tasks while my father, the president, manages major strategies. As an only child, I'm expected to eventually take over the company. Despite the looming responsibility, I carefully balance my personal and professional life, especially around Mason. Mason, who completed high school and works for a moving company, has a demanding job that I respect. To avoid making him feel inadequate, I rarely discuss my university degree or my anticipated future as president. Mason and I met through a mutual friend during college. After my friend's move, which was managed by Mason's company, she introduced us. Although Mason was initially interested in her, after she turned him down, we began to get to know each other. His easygoing nature complemented my meticulousness, and our relationship blossomed. We married in our late 20s after a brief courtship, and our marriage has been smooth, bolstered by the warm acceptance of Mason's parents, a welcome contrast to the usual in-law challenges. Despite Mason's demanding job often keeping him late and physically exhausted, he remained committed to our marriage. Even on his toughest days, he would express gratitude as I waited up to share dinner with him. I felt fortunate to have such a devoted husband. However, after a year of marriage, our peaceful life started to show signs of strain. One night, as we settled into bed, Mason unexpectedly broached the topic of having children. His tone was tinged with irritation, catching me off guard. I had considered starting a family too, and although we weren't actively trying, I believed it would happen in time. I reassured him that there was no rush, wanting children, but knowing that stressing about it wouldn't help. I adopted a calm demeanor, but Mason, more assertive than usual, quoted statistics. You know, there's about a 90% chance of conceiving within a year for couples not using contraception. The figure seemed surprisingly high to me. I suggested we both get tested to address any potential issues together. Mason's reaction was unexpectedly harsh. What are you implying? That it's my fault? Usually, it's the woman's fault, he retorted with contempt. It was the first time he had spoken to me this way. I hadn't accused him of anything. I merely suggested a joint approach to find clarity. Yet Mason concluded I was blaming him, adding, "It's definitely the woman's fault," as if to emphasize that I was the problem. I wanted to respond but was too shaken, barely managing to say, "Of course, just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. I have a job too, you know. You're just coasting along in your dad's company." His words stung. Although my role involved administrative tasks, I was actively learning management skills from my father to prepare for leading the company one day. That night, any attempt at discussion was met with curt replies, and we fell asleep with our backs turned, a heavy silence between us. From then on, Mason's attitude toward me shifted drastically. Returning home late one evening after discussing the future with my father, I found Mason irate over dinner. "I'm sorry," I said, but the damage had been done. I had just arrived home 15 minutes earlier and quickly explained, "I'll start cooking now, just wait a little please." Mason, however, brushed off my explanation with a dismissive wave. "That's typical of a small company boss's daughter," he sneered, clearly unaware of the scale of my father's business, a major real estate company with hundreds of employees. His assumptions and growing bitterness were making our daily lives increasingly difficult, casting a shadow over what had once been a loving and supportive relationship. As I hurried to the kitchen, I promised Mason I would cook immediately. "Have a drink and relax while you wait," I suggested, knowing how alcohol seemed to soothe him. It saddened me that our relationship had come to rely on his evening drinks to avoid tension. I hated being scolded, but if it meant keeping the peace, even temporarily, I reluctantly accepted it as a necessary compromise. The next morning, Mason's cold demeanor lingered as he left for work, his parting words sharp. "Make sure dinner's ready when I get home." I exhaled deeply, my mind already focused on the day ahead. I had scheduled a day off to visit the gynecologist for fertility testing, a step Mason had insisted on. though he refused to participate himself. It was frustrating to handle this alone, but complaining wouldn't solve anything if the issue was with me. I was eager to start treatment, understanding that fertility could decline with age. The clinic was crowded, and I waited for an hour before my examination. After a series of tests, the doctor informed me that the results would be available at my next appointment. The possibility that I might be the one with fertility issues was daunting, but I was prepared to take whatever steps were necessary. When Mason returned home that evening, I told him I had gone for the fertility test. His response was indifferent. "Figures," he said. "If the problem is with you, at least you're getting tested. Let me know the results." His assumption that I was to blame for our difficulties in conceiving was hurtful. 6 years had passed, and I was now 37. Our attempts to have a child continued without success, and it seemed Mason had resigned himself to the idea of never becoming a father. His late nights became more frequent, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he would say he'd been out drinking and singing karaoke until dawn. His behavior, reminiscent of a carefree college student rather than a committed husband, was incredibly frustrating. My work had become more demanding, and the dream of starting a family had to be put on hold. Mason's recent actions were becoming intolerable. One day, after Mason left the house on his day off, I noticed he had forgotten his smartphone in the living room. I picked up Mason's forgotten phone with the intention of returning it to his room, but it rang just as I grabbed it. The caller ID showed a name I didn't recognize. "Diana?" Assuming she was a colleague, I answered, intending to let her know Mason had left his phone at home. "Hey Mason, you're late," came the flirtatious voice from the other end. "I've been waiting for 50 minutes. Hurry up or we'll miss the park opening. We haven't had a date in so long." The mention of a date took me by surprise, and my heart raced as I realized this woman wasn't just a colleague. She was someone Mason was seeing romantically. My grip tightened on the phone, my mind swirling with shock and anger. While I was grappling with potential infertility, Mason had been carrying on an affair. His recent distance suddenly made sense, and I stood there, trembling with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Determined to confront the situation, I started gathering evidence of his infidelity. Unlocking his smartphone with his birth date was effortless, and what I found was a call history and messages filled with affectionate and intimate exchanges with someone named Diana. Each message turned my stomach, but I meticulously documented everything, taking photos with my phone before returning his device to its usual spot, pretending nothing had changed. A month passed in this unsettling state of our fractured marriage until one day my father, the president of our company, called me into his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said solemnly. His grave tone caught me off guard, and I braced myself for more stress. That evening, sensing that a change was imminent, Mason suggested we consider separating. I had already been contemplating how to address the divorce, given his infidelity, so his initiation was unexpectedly convenient. "Yes, let's get a divorce," I agreed, feeling a grim sense of relief. I agreed quickly, and Mason looked taken aback by my readiness. He seemed hopeful about his future with Diana, though his relief stung. I signed the divorce papers he presented, and he said nonchalantly, "I'll file these tomorrow. I'm leaving this house." "Are you sure about the mortgage?" I asked casually, suspecting he hadn't fully considered his financial situation without me. His job was demanding but not lucrative, and I doubted his ability to manage the mortgage payments on his own. Nevertheless, he appeared confident, or perhaps just naive. Given his betrayal, I felt no obligation to ease his transition. I moved back to my parents' house a few days later. They were initially concerned about my well-being but became furious when I explained Mason's infidelity. They supported my decision to leave him and reassured me repeatedly that parting ways was the best decision. Throwing myself into work, I tried to move past the emotional turmoil of my failed marriage. A year passed in a blur of commitments and projects. One evening, seeing how exhausted and stressed I had become, my father suggested, "Why don't you take a trip? It's going to get busy starting next month." Concerned for my well-being and grateful for the suggestion, I decided to take a solo trip to the Northeast, craving a change of scenery and some peace. The crisp, refreshing air of the Northeast seemed to cleanse my weary soul. The kindness of the locals helped mend my spirit. I decided to book a stay at a renowned hotel in Los Angeles, indulging in the best experience possible. After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink, letting the fatigue of my journey melt away. I felt so at peace that I half-jokingly mentioned moving to Los Angeles. Just then, a familiar voice pierced through the calm. "Ha! Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned, startled to see Mason entering the lobby with two large suitcases. My unexpected encounter with my ex-husband was the last thing I anticipated on this healing journey. As I absorbed the elegant charm of the Los Angeles hotel lobby, reality jolted me when I spotted Mason with a young woman on his arm. She appeared to be in her early 20s with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails. Her attire, a short skirt, seemed out of place given the cold weather. My eyes locked onto them in disbelief. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I blurted out, my curiosity getting the better of me despite my doubts about wanting answers. "Oh, let me introduce you," Mason said with a hint of excitement. I hadn't seen Mason in a long time, so his appearance took me by surprise. "This is Diana, my new wife," he announced with a smirk. "We're on our honeymoon, and guess what? She's the daughter of a wealthy businessman." The name Diana hit me like a wave. She was the same Diana from the phone call months ago. I felt a surge of discomfort at Mason's obvious pride in marrying someone so much younger and well-connected. "You're here alone?" Mason sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "That's sad." Beside him, Diana eyed me with a smirk. "Hey Mason, is this your ex-wife? She looks so old." "Hurry up with the check-in," she said, her tone sharp and irritated. I managed to maintain my composure as Mason casually draped an arm around her, boasting, "Yeah, I'm set for life now. Marrying into money. You keep struggling in your modest life." Mason's high-pitched laugh cut through the serene atmosphere of the lobby, a stark contrast to the tranquility I had been enjoying. He continued to flaunt his new life. "Yeah, Diana is Goldsmith's daughter. You know Goldsmith Enterprises," he added, his pride palpable. The mention of Goldsmith Enterprises rang a bell. I recalled it as Mason's face lit up with childlike glee. "Impressive, huh? Her family's loaded. They even paid off our house mortgage quickly. Thanks for making the divorce easy, Patricia," he said sarcastically. "Yeah, I know them. They're in that big building downtown, right?" "I've been there," I replied calmly, barely fazed by his remarks. Mason looked surprised. "Oh, you've been there? Well, her family owns a huge company, so breaking up with you was the right choice," he smirked maliciously. I nodded, still calm. "That building, it's part of our real estate holdings," I mentioned casually, as if recalling a minor detail. "What do you mean, our real estate?" Mason and Diana chimed in together, both perplexed. "That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office," I explained. "I'm not sure if your company is involved in real estate, but it's certainly not a shabby building." I spoke with a serene tone, though their skepticism was palpable. I knew there was no turning back. "Yes, I'm aware of how grand it is. I was there when my father purchased that building for about $500 million. Recently, he mentioned a tenant was behind on their rent. It turns out it was your company. My father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $5 billion, and that building is one of them. Goldsmith Enterprises has been the tenant for the past few months, and they haven't paid their rent." I watched their reactions closely. Diana burst out laughing, disbelief written all over her face. "That can't be true. Our company's doing great," she insisted, still laughing. But the shock in her eyes told a different story. Despite the shock of seeing Mason with his new wife, I was determined not to be drawn into their drama. Diana's loud claims that their company could surely pay the rent echoed around us, hinting at denial or deceit. Her dismissive tone suggested I was lying just to create discord between her and Mason. Realizing that a simple conversation wouldn't suffice, I pulled out my smartphone right there in the hotel lobby. "I'm here with the daughter of Goldsmith Enterprises," I told my dad over the phone. "Can you send me a photo of the rent reminder notice?" Moments later, my father sent a clear image of the notice addressed to Goldsmith Enterprises, showing 4 months of unpaid rent. I showed the image to Mason and Diana, hoping they couldn't dismiss it as fake given the immediate proof. "See, if you don't pay soon, we might have to consider legal action," I said calmly. "What are you going to do?" Diana's confidence wavered as she mumbled, "Come to think of it, Dad has been stressed lately, talking about slow sales and firing a lot of employees." Mason, however, spiraled into denial, accusing me of fabricating the story to drive a wedge between them. You're just trying to trick us and tear us apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty," he shouted, causing me to step back, shocked by his loud, accusing voice. His words brought back painful memories of our marriage, all the harsh things he had said when times were tough. But standing here now, I was no longer the person who took his words silently. "What are you even saying, Mason? Do you really think I still have feelings for you?" "How foolish. I've long been over a man like you," I retorted. "I feel sorry for Diana getting caught up with someone like you," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Did you marry her just for her money? You had shallow reasons for marrying me too, wanting to rush into marriage and have kids. And who was it that left me when we found out we couldn't have children? Who called me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, and yet you think I still have feelings for you. You must be out of your mind." Mason's face flushed red with anger. "You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Diana and I are planning to have fun making a baby after this trip," he retorted, his voice thick with desperation. That was when I decided to reveal the truth and end his assumptions once and for all. "Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 5 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so my dad suggested I take this trip to relax," I said calmly. "That's right. After our divorce, I found someone who truly supports me, my boss at work who happens to be a subordinate of my father. He's been a great support both personally and professionally. I discovered I was pregnant just 5 months ago. It was a quick marriage, but my company and my father celebrated it grandly." Mason's bravado evaporated as he processed the news. "You're pregnant. So were you using birth control?" he asked, his question absurd and revealing his confusion. I felt a mix of pity and relief as I looked at him. My life had moved on from the chaos he had brought. "My life has moved on from the chaos you caused," I said bluntly. "Remember, I had infertility tests, and they found no issues with me. The problem wasn't solely with me." His face contorted with realization. "Does that mean Diana and I can't have kids?" he muttered, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Why did I divorce you to marry Diana?" Diana's anger flared. "Why do you think? We felt betrayed knowing you were infertile," she snapped back, her frustration evident. Realizing there was no reason to engage further, I delivered my final statement. "From now on, please keep your affairs separate from mine. Regarding the rent for Goldsmith Enterprises, I expect full payment if you intend to continue leasing the building. Please settle the overdue rent soon, or we'll need to pursue legal action. I have nothing more to say to you. Goodbye." With that, I left Mason and Diana mid-argument and confidently returned to my hotel room. Upon my return, my husband greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome back. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay?" "It was fine. I'm just glad you got to relax," he replied, his smile genuine and comforting. Since marrying my current husband, I felt reassured daily, and thoughts of Mason had faded into the background. After that incident, I didn't see Mason again. Through my father's contacts, I learned that Mason and Diana's situation had worsened. Despite Mason's initial belief that he was marrying into wealth, he discovered that Goldsmith Enterprises was deeply in debt. News broke on TV about an employee at Goldsmith Enterprises embezzling millions. Diana's father had tried to cover up the fraud to protect the company's reputation, but once the scandal became public, Goldsmith Enterprises' stock plummeted, and the company lost its credibility. A mass exodus of employees followed. In such dire straits, it was clear they couldn't cover their rent, let alone recover from the scandal. This turn of events reaffirmed my relief in having moved on from that chapter in my life, as I focused on a future filled with stability and genuine affection with my new husband.